Welcome to the place of rest, where our aim is to give you language that helps you displace the growing confusion, chaos, and dis-ease of our times. My name is Jonathan Boyce, and it's my pleasure to bring to you today's episode. With Father's Day arriving soon, Virginia sits down with Dr. Randy Bixby to discuss the value of men, the things that often derail our purpose, and the tools we have at our disposal to aid in knowing our identity and choosing to self-govern. We hope you enjoy today's conversation.
Randy, we're finally doing it. I'm so happy you were able to join me.
As well.
Good. I can't think of a better person to have a discussion with about the state of the family, but specifically the role of men in that family. We all come from families, right? Or we all have one.
Yes.
So this is a topic near and dear to our heart. Thank you.
Thank you. The one thing about getting together with you, Virginia, our conversations are compelling and stimulating and often cause more questions than answers, although our answers are pretty good too.
Well, you know, I know for an absolute fact that the mental and emotional health of a family is a subject that is near and dear to your heart. And I consider you an authority on this subject for many reasons. So thank you really for joining me. I know how busy you are and what a crazy schedule you keep. And I want our listening audience to become more and more acquainted with your work during the course of this next year. The unprecedented confusion, chaos, and disease that is upon us in every single facet of society, but specifically the institution of the nuclear family. And I focus on that because when you think about religious institutions, you think of civil government institutions, everything comes from the home. So the home is the hub, right?
It is. I actually have a brand new model. I call it the circumplex model. And I won't unpack it here, but essentially the overall thought is that family is just one of the components of culture. And while that's true, I think there's a higher level of definition of what the family is. And it really is, family is the source. It's the center. And out from the center comes what we do in business and economics and government and arts and entertainment. And all of that, in my worldview, is to then create healthy families who then create healthy families. And so all of the influence that's coming at the cultural gates is coming ultimately from the source of family. So whatever we carry through our families, the wounds, the truths, the good, the bad, and the ugly, is absolutely showing up at our power centers of culture. And we have what we have right now, which frankly is a pretty good mess. Because our families are a mess. We say this, culture is downstream from family.
Wow. So good. So good. And I love how you explain it. That is so your brand. And it is so a message that I think you're a steward of. And thank you really for sharing that with us. The role of men and the value of women is often scrutinized, undermined, and challenged, right? And we get our identity and our image, and we begin to understand our nature from this institution that we call a family.
Mm-hmm.
So I want to give people context to why I consider you an authority on this subject. And I'd say the thing I respect most about you is your honesty, your integrity, your transparency. But when families are in crisis, that is a very complicated transaction. So I'd like everyone to have a little bit of context for who you are and what's informed your life's work with these family legacy projects that you're all about.
Thank you, Virginia. That's very kind. I believe this authority comes from a few things. It comes from, number one, experience. But just experience is not enough. It also has to come from learning and wisdom. And ultimately, what I call overcoming. So that's my story. When you say, how are you an expert? Well, the truth is, I came from a pretty good, healthy nuclear family for the most part. Mom and dad were home, decent school life, but I still got deceived and confused as a young person around my value, my identity, around my worth. And for me, the lie happened to be, it was my identity was determined by my performance. As long as I got straight A's, as long as I won every hockey game, as long as I was always doing the right thing at the right time, better than anybody else, I was okay. And as you deal, I know, with people, the fruit of that over time, well, guess what? I made a lot of mistakes. And when I did, those were devastating because of that choice I had made to give my value, equate to my performance. And so I experienced, the pain either firsthand or in my marriages and family or through the family relationships over these last few decades, things like abortion, early death, adultery, betrayal, divorce, sickness, addiction recovery. And I'm rattling these off, but I mean, every one of those is a whole bomb in terms of how to deal with that. And I know a lot of families today, even your listeners, if it hasn't touched them, and it probably has, it's touched their kids, or it's touched their brothers and sisters, or it's touched their extended family. And for me, I found myself just really, really in a dark place. I never thought about taking my life, but I had lost a lot of hope for life. And I had an encounter one day. For me, it was a faith encounter, a spiritual encounter, and it changed my thinking. And I made a couple of really important, I can't take credit for it. I just agreed with what was happening in the moment, but I took it to heart. And it was, number one, I determined that my identity was not based on my performance, that was separate from me in some ways, that I was able to take personal responsibility and make choices that had results attached to them. That it was my belief systems. There's an ancient proverb that says, guard your heart above all things, for out of it flow the issues of life. And it clicked for me. Life happens from us, not to us. There's all kinds of externals, no doubt, but how I interpret that, how I define it, how I respond to it, what I make that outside stimulus mean about me, about marriage, about my kids, about the world, about economics, about politics, that all is determined by me, by my choice of what to believe, what to agree with in my heart. And I began to see some deeper levels, and you work with this all the time, of it's in my subconscious, in my heart, if you will, that I have all of these beliefs and agreements, and these belief systems are actually what drive my experience, my emotions, my behavior, my outcomes, and I actually have the ability to change those agreements and change those beliefs once I recognize they're there. And that's the thing, right, with neuroscience and your work. Our belief systems are hidden, most of them. 85, 90, 95 even now. Some reports are saying studies of those beliefs are hidden. So after experiencing those and saying, well, what do I do now? I went through really a long and arduous journey in many ways, but a liberating journey. I mean, talk about liberty. I know that's dear to your heart. I found freedom. I was empowered. I had a new hope for life. And in the face of all of that yuck, now, as you know, and thank you again for the work you did with my wife, who was near death, really, and looking for answers, and she found you, and we have heaven on earth right now. That's not an exaggeration. Every day.
But what you're saying is so important, because when you come into alignment with these truths,
yes,
it's like unkinking the hose that makes up our very constitution, right?
Yeah.
That is the communication between our spirit, our soul, and our body. And really what you're talking about in the most practical ways is, hey, identifying where are the kinks in that life-giving mechanism, if you will, that's been established according to the counsel of God's will and the creative order of all things. I mean, these are self-evident truths, congruent with laws of nature. These are obvious things. But when those things come into alignment, that experience is possible because we live in a different realm, right? Experiencing what we often call the kingdom of heaven. It's right here.
Yes.
It's accessible to us. And I love how you described how you came into alignment with that. So you've taken a very complex, messy narrative we call life, even coming from a somewhat well-adjusted family, but how it translated because of how you viewed yourself and the world around you, it really created a lot of confusion and chaos and dis-ease that derailed your life, and it manifested. And I love how you went through that whole list of things you've experienced, because that's reality. And I think one of the things I want people listening to realize is we don't have to live in a state of shame, in a state of despair, in a state of disease. Whether we have cancer or not, it doesn't matter what's afflicting us. If we can grasp the spirit of what you just said, everything can turn around. I know you were married. You said marriages, for example. You were married many times, several times. Talk about that for a minute so people can find hope in what you're saying.
Yeah, I met my wife in college and married, had 3 kids, and we were on the, on the ladder in my, I was in the ministry world, but I was a national denominational executive, and while I was traveling, she decided, for whatever the reasons, to step out of the marriage and go to other men and everything, and she decided to leave. And that was devastating, especially at that time I still had that performance equals my identity, so my reputation was so important. And so that was a dark day for a lot of reasons, not just that reason. And then what that brought into my kids. And I was just thinking about this a few days ago. It's been about 22 years since that my first wife left. And it's just now, over 22 years, that our kids are being more fully restored. 2 of my kids have completely gotten healed, gotten restored, are living in purpose, are right with the Lord, which is important to me. And our other daughter is right there. And it has taken a number of years of living consistently in myself. Really, and here's the point I really want to bring to men eventually when we get to that is, we have to step up. We're too passive. We don't understand that the secret of manhood and of fatherhood and of being a husband is being intentional, is showing up on purpose the way we were designed. And, we can blame and we can get distracted so easily. And I was, until I wasn't. And I hope that you don't have to go through what I went through to make that decision. But yeah, and so I remarried very quickly after that. I was a single father with 3 kids in my situation, and I remarried too quickly. And after a few years, that went pretty far south as well. And my kids really got double whammy. I mean, they experienced the abandonment and betrayal and some other massive dysfunctions through my first wife. But and I'm not blaming them. I'm clean on them. I have my own part to play. So let me just say that. I'm not trying to speak poorly of anybody. What happened. But in my second marriage, the kids really, really got really hurt. Mama wounds. And so for 7 years, my second wife divorced me. I don't want to. And 7 years of counseling, 7 years of therapy. My response, I still was not totally free of this performance thinking. And so I'll try harder. Finally, I had nothing left to try harder. And when that marriage ended is when I was really at my lowest in 2016, which is just 8 years ago now. And
wow.
The rebirth and life that has come in the last 8 years, and Leslie, of course, came in supernaturally. We've been married 6 years, and it's just, we talk about this, the 2 of us, and she's got her own story, which is similar to mine, maybe even more
traumatic,
disastrous in many ways. Traumatic, thank you. but we would do it all again to have what we have now, in the sense that it caused both of us to make some choices, to be intentional about what we believe about God, ourselves, the world, what's happening, and to take personal responsibility.
That's it.
And this is it. Part of our message. Part of the message to man today is take personal responsibility. Come on, guys.
We have so many people that want to gift healing to their friends and family members. Due to popular request, we've officially created the Gift of Rest package for purchase. Please go to theplaceofrest.com/wholeness packages to view the Gift of Rest. If you've been listening to our podcast regularly and are now wondering, what's next, or how can I get more support? Our Day of Rest course is available to support you in your pilgrimage. Use the promo code PODCAST, all lowercase, to receive a 10% discount for our introductory Day of Rest course. Now back to the show.
But what you just said is so important, because the indispensable value of a man has very little to do with his performance. At the end of the day, it has more to do with how he sees himself, how he sees the world around him, how he sees his family. And the most important thing is that he sees, in my opinion and my observation, the importance of his authority and his convictions and his love and his prince, provider, protector. The essence of his very anatomy, by the way, bears witness of our need for him, right? So different than our own. And I know that in my 43-year marriage, and it's got a lot of twists and turns and everything, but that's what has been so important to me, is the substance, the essence, and how race showed up in our marriage. However, that said, I will agree with you 100% that the performance and the identity, when that crumbles, everything, all bets are off. And it seems like a family is deeply afflicted with pornography, with workaholism that drives that need for meaning and purpose and value. So what you're saying is so important. And I know Leslie, your lovely wife, that is one of the closest and dearest people to my heart on so many levels, she was afflicted by broken men in her life, honestly. And you guys become so important. So while you're speaking, I kept thinking, a man is perfected, a human being, a person is perfected by the things they suffer. And I want people listening to find hope in that. Because that's really the refinement that became this cultural architect, the family legacy projects. Your life's work is around, is the beauty of from those ashes, right?
That's 100% it. And I can't take credit for that. Really. I mean, in my experience, this was the work of God and his love and his mercy. Now, I cooperated and I didn't quit and I didn't give up. And so we do have a part to play. Men listening today, women listening, every one of us have a personal responsibility in how we govern our own hearts. Guard your heart above all things, because life happens out from you. But with our gifting, that's what happened. Is immediately when I was at the bottom and God says, love your family, and I woke up with fresh eyes. Like, okay, I can't do it anymore. I need to start over. What's the design for a family? And I began to see, as I studied and prayed and read, so clearly what I had missed in 20 years before, which was there's a pattern for family. There is a structure. There's a design. And that design really, if we'll do it that way, is perfect. And it works. And as my training was in leadership development, in experiential learning, and so I began immediately to use what was in my hand to create these experiential tools. We call them modules for our family to go through, and we started going through them together in our living room. Literally, our living room was littered with white paper all over the walls for over a year. as we started these modules in the structure that I was beginning to see about how to do family as design, and our family began to heal. And then through that process, these 60 tools, and then all of a sudden now, I want you to write this for other families. And so, wow, that was something. And to go through that. And now we're working in a large scale with families doing the family school. Where do you go to learn to do family? The family school. Anyway, that's a little bit of a rabbit trail.
It isn't, because men have authority, women have power, and that represents the framework around which a family operates. I love what you're explaining, that there is a system, there is a pattern, there is a matrix to this. And I want to talk to you about that in a future episode, about these 60 tools, about the resources people can have. I think the most important part of this segment of our conversation about the value of men, the indispensable value of men, is that it is the things you've learned and the specific ways in which you've suffered, which, by the way, between you and Leslie, you guys cover all bases. And everything I ever see behind closed doors, everything imaginable. By the way, us too, I'm finding we're living in a time where all the confusion, chaos, and disease that is imaginable is coming to bear on our families. And if not on our marriages, our children. If we've, sown the storm, we're reaping the whirlwind now, right? And this is something we've got to take into account. And I just am so excited about future conversations with you around these tools. But how did you survive it all? Besides faith, of course, and God, but
number one, I discovered what my identity was really about. Instead of performance, instead of all this other thing, it was, who am I? And that really is the crisis that must be solved first. Who are you? If I don't know who I am, how can I possibly succeed at it? And so, who am I as a man? Who am I as a husband? Who am I as a father? Who am I really? Why am I here? Who am I and what's my purpose? And so the identity piece was first for me in this quest after restoring my family. Second was personal responsibility. We talked about that. I recognize that, wow, I have been given a will, and that will is powerful. Wherever my will goes, my whole being goes. And I love your language. I tell you, we use this a lot with our clients. We give you credit. The anatomy of dissent, all of what happened there, and what that really looks like. That is present every day for every person still, unless we operate through that. But I took personal responsibility instead of wishing, hoping, medicating, trying to make it happen on my own, trying all the different ways. I said, wait a minute, I have to govern myself. Really, there's a piece of self-governing that comes in here. How do I direct the flow of me? So that led me through the emotional intelligence work, which is now a lot of what we help people with. And I'd say this to men especially. You've got to be able to self-govern yourself. What does it even mean to govern who you are? You're a spirit, but you have a mind and a will, and you have emotions, and you have a body. And how do you do all that in a way that is by design, where you can actually love and provide?
Your story is captivating because it is one of great intentions, poor execution. And I think that's the story of all of our lives. A lot of us get out of bed every day and we have good intentions to do good things. But something is lost between our good intentions and the execution. We become so easily derailed. And that concept of identity, I think it's relevant to women and men. But somehow, I think women are warriors in a different way than men. I always say men are sensitive, women are emotional. My mentor told me that years and years ago, and I find that to be true. The identity of men can be so easily pierced by sensitivities that often they're not aware of. And I think by and large, men take their constitution, the essence of who they are and what they have, very seriously. But we've lost this mentoring, this training, this discipleship, counseling, this culture of what to do with those resources. And I love your story because and I want you to finish this segment on this note. Everybody listening to this podcast, men and women alike, but right now, especially men should say, wow, Randy Bixby identifies with my brokenness. Sensitivity is not fragility. Sensitivity is not weakness. Sensitivity is what gives you the capacity to be meek, to exercise strength under control. And I think because I know the ins and outs of your story so well, but I think your whole story embodies why they can leverage that truth and completely stop, think about what we're talking about, and repent, turn around, and change the trajectory of their whole life. So with that, will you finish this segment?
You mentioned a mentor. I had a mentor, and the mentor said to me, Randy, what you want is irrelevant. You have what you're most committed to right now.
Wow.
Woo. And he's right. We can want, we can long, we can desire. And it's not that it's not important, but it's irrelevant in the sense that I actually have the mental health, the emotional health, the relationship with my spouse and my kids. I have what I'm most committed to in this moment. And that's a mirror that can be harsh, but it's true. And just like, any addiction recovery, there is a coming to agreement, or acceptance is the word, of it is what it is. I got what I got right now. That was my 2016. I got what I got. I've been married twice, now 2 divorces. Not what I wanted, but that's what I got. I've got kids who are wounded. I'm wounded. That's what I got. I've got, where do I go from here? I mean, I was a ministry guy. I'm thinking I'm losing everything. Usually they take you out of ministry, and that didn't happen by the grace of God for me, but I thought it was gonna. My point is, here's our saying. It's simple, but it's powerful. And it's this: it is what it is. What next? It is what it is acceptance. You might be listening. You're like, this is what I got. I don't like it. It's painful. I want to run away from it. I want to medicate from it, whatever. But it is what it is. If you can accept that, then if you stay there, it's hopeless and it's depressing and it's terrible. However, if you do what you just said, Virginia, if you recognize, wait a minute, what's next? I am the determiner of what's next for me. I get to choose. I'm not a victim. This is a deep hole, but there's a way out of it. There's a way through this challenge. There's a way not just around or through, but there's an overcoming. And this is the difference. And this is, I think, a good place to end it. I was listening in church Sunday, and the pastor said, he's talking about family. We're going to do a big family conference there. And he's leading up to it with these messages around family. And he said, I want to tell you this. I trust broken, healed people. I trust broken, healed leaders. Why? Because broken, healed people, and this is what's so important about what you do, what we get the privilege of doing, is when you have healed from something that you're broken from, now you're an overcomer. And there is an overflow in your life of hope and joy and strength and solution that now you have and you embody to share with others in your family, in your friendships, in your relationships. And so this is, and you speak to this a lot with, we're all seeking to reconcile those things in our lives that have been broken, that have been lost, even generationally. It's in how we're made up. We move toward solving those things. And when you overcome, it's such a beautiful, beautiful testimony. And it's powerful, and it impacts other people.
Wow. Perfect words to close with. The darker the times, the greater the promise, the more vast the opportunities. And thank you for closing us with that thought. That was powerful. Thank you so much, Randy.
Thanks for the opportunity, Virginia.
We trust that listening to today's episode has brought you closer to experiencing the freedom of wholeness and healing. If you have comments or questions about today's episode, or for updates about R.E.S.T, please visit our Instagram or Facebook at The Place of R.E.S.T. If you would like more information about Virginia, or to support and join the cause of R.E.S.T, please go to theplaceofrest.com/donate or call 949-289-5935. Thank you for listening to R.E.S.T with Virginia Dixon. We'll see you next week.